Hi everyone. Thanks for joining today. I think this day, like today, we are going to have a Azure Fundamentals Part 3. We are going to discuss. In this Part 3, we are aiming to cover few Azure services, which is really important in the modern days. It is going to be exciting sessions today. As I mentioned, Azure Fundamentals is only for to understand the high level. You don't need to know the in-depth knowledge around each of the services. So try to focus on high level, each services, what is the use case, when to use, what purpose, etc. So today, I think I'll move into the actual subject today. So most of you familiar who we are, what we are doing. I think this is part of the MK Azure User Group community service. We are aiming to help the individuals within this region. Similar user group, there are many in this country. So we are focused on Midland and Milton Keynes. And most of you already familiar who I am, what I'm doing, etc. So I'm going to skip this one. You already familiar with the preparation for exam AC 900. So in part 3, as I mentioned, we are going to talk about, discuss the Azure services, which are Azure Machine Learning, Cognitive Services, Bot Service, DevOps, GitHub, Dev Test Tools, Azure Advisor, Monitor, and Health Services. So what these services are going to help us, how we are going to get benefit out of these technologies. When we talk about machine learning, I think this is the new buzzword in the industry. Everybody talking about machine learning, and it is still maturing. Many organizations already started using this. For example, the heavy machinery organizations. The last time I mentioned, I gave an example of lift company in Japan. They had a lots of service issues. To avoid those service issues, to give the business continuity, they collected the data from the sensor controls fixed in the lift. So whenever they collected data, they predicted the issues before it happening, so that they're able to predict the maintenance issue before that happened, the previous night, or whenever they have the allowed outages, they have conducted those machine fixes. Because of that, it helps the business to run without any interruptions. So machine learning main use case is to help the prediction. And mainly on the banking sector in UK, there are many organizations currently using machine learning. Example like the banks has the if they're giving a loan, to understand the person or the risk analysis of the person, whatever the data he has or she has in the current system or other system. So they are running the data and getting the outcome from that. So the machine learning is more of like a process. You can obtain the data, you can train the data, and you can also predict the outcome from that the data you are training. So that is one of the use cases. Also, like Microsoft Azure gives us the machine learning workflow orchestration, where we can just run a pipelines to do whatever the activities we wanted. Apart from this machine learning concept, there are other scenarios, like when you are running a large scale of data, you need a high processing computer. So we have seen in the previous sessions, like Azure as a virtual machines, big data capabilities, those can be used to support the machine learning use cases. The next topic we want to talk about the cognitive services. The cognitive services, it's pretty much, it is already in the use. Like if you are familiar with the devices currently we have, like if it is in the Windows 10 laptop, you have a Cognito. If it is Amazon, you have the Amazon Echo services. So what those services are helping us, if you want to get information about that. There are already predefined reusable services. Azure cognitive services are created. For example, language services, speech services, vision services, decision services. These services are helping to utilize within our use cases. Either we are developing application or we are developing a product. If you wanted to talk to somebody in English and then respond to you in a different language, you can use language services. If you wanted to talk to a device and device can help you with the response, then you can use the speech services. Vision services, um, it can use your videos or images to analyze and provide the outcome. So maybe in high level, this is not um, clear at this stage. Then if you think the day-to-day uses, what are the technologies we are using, what are the devices we are using, then you can relate, oh, I'm using Amazon Echo at my home, and okay, I'm talking to the Amazon, how this is responding. So behind the screen, basically this is observing your language, your speech. It is sending to the backend system. The backend system has the set of processes um, which can act your resource, like the questions you asked, the backend systems can respond to that, the process and respond to that. Sometime like based on your voice, like whatever you are talking to that devices, they analyze your emotions, and based on the emotions it can respond or it can take a decision out of that emotions. So these Amazon cognitives, the Amazon Echo is one of the example, and these Azure cognitive services not directly helping, but these are indirectly helping the human life, day-to-day life, to make our life easier. So the other items, I think this we talk about, right? So the Amazon cognitive services pretty much mentioned here. The next one, the topic we need to understand from the for this particular exam, Azure bot services. Bot services, like these days, whenever you go to any websites or bank sites or any kind of websites, they will have a little chat messages. um, Sometimes we think, oh, this is really I'm talking to a person or some system is talking to me. So it is purely developed on bot services technology, chatbot, or conversational artificial intelligence technologies. So what these bot services is helping us, we can go and create a bot services based on the question answer. So these question answers already predefined, or it is coming from the knowledge base. So whatever the questions you are writing on the chat, it already, maybe the questions already matching to the existing question answer input, or it can go into knowledge base and try to find out the relevant answer what you are looking for. So this bot services will be helpful if you are developing a website and you don't want to keep a heavy human-based help desk center. Then you can go with the bot services. This can help you business to grow. So this is more of like just to understand the decision criteria, where to use what. So if you see the first item, or you building a virtual agent that interface with the human via natural language. This is more of like Azure, Azure Cognitive Services has vision, speech, etc. So if you wanted to use chatbot to talk to those cognitive services to get your answers, that's also can helpful. Like you can combine the services to get the benefit out of it. So in this particular scenario, you are trying to build a virtual agent that can interact with the natural language. So natural language is one of the cognitive services, but what is the use case here? The requirement is virtual agent. So virtual agent is more of like suitable for chatbot services. So you can go with the Azure bot services to do that. If you see the third item, if you like, do you need to predict users' behavior or provide users personalized recommendation in your app? So this is more of like a cognitive services related decision making service, or understanding the users' behaviors. So those are related to cognitive services. So if you have any use cases like this, you can use cognitive services. So we can move to the next item. It's pretty much what have we seen in the past. Quickly, you can have a look. If you have a time in the end, we can come back to this section and talk about this knowledge check again. So the next topic, we are going to talk about some of the key elements like the tool sets needed for helping our organization or helping the cloud transformations. So whenever we work on a project for IT development or IT business related benefits we are developing, so it's more of like a software development. To do that software development lifecycle, you have a set of process like you discuss with the team, understand the requirement, and then you capture it. You start developing. While developing, you need to maintain the source code. Then you will be testing those deployments, that the build you developed, or you may be successful. Then you will be using the development code into staging environment and production environment. So this kind of activities, the pure software lifecycle, how and what kind of technologies or tool set services available in Azure is going to help us. We are going to explore now. I think the left hand side, whatever you see, these are the scenarios is demanded currently. The right hand side, you can see the list of services available in Azure. For example, software development lifecycle, the complete package can be delivered with Azure DevOps services. Source code management and version control. Azure DevOps contains a component called repository, repo, which can be useful for source code management and version control. Then the testing also part of the testing component, also part of the Azure DevOps. Continuous integration and continuous delivery CI/CD pipeline. These can be delivered with the pipeline component within the Azure DevOps. Source control, you can use either Azure DevOps or you can also use GitHub. This is one of the major heavily used open source product we can use and integrate with Azure DevOps. You don't need to necessarily use Azure Repo for source control management. Then the last one, infrastructure as a code. This is, I think we have we discussed in the last session, ARM templates, how ARM templates is helping to deploy any services within the Azure. So you can write a ARM template script, JSON package, give it to PowerShell. When you execute the PowerShell, it automatically creating the resources you need. It could be a virtual machine or it could be a SQL server. And within that virtual machines, you want to enable any kind of roles features, you can use infrastructure as a code. So quickly, I will run through the Azure. So this is the Azure DevOps portal. When you log into the Azure DevOps portal, it allows you to create a new project for your need. See here, I have one example of Smart Hotel 360. This is one of the samples from Microsoft. If I go to my dashboard, this is more of like a Kanban, or the boards are pretty much used for tracking your work item requirements, what you're assigning to your users, your developers, what are you collected from your business. It can be a user stories or a task you'll be maintaining in the system. This is more of like a work item tracker, and these work items you can convert it as either sprint planning, like a sprint board, or a Kanban board, or sprint board. This can be useful. This is the example of number of items currently I have. What is the status of each items, and you can see these items assigned to whom, what they are doing with this. This is pretty much helpful for the pure product development team. And as I mentioned, this has a 5 different subcomponent. Board is pretty much you already familiar now. Repository, repos. This is pretty much used for source control, maintenance, check-in, check-out. You can work with the multiple developers. If you are familiar with the VSTS or VSTS Online, this is the replacement from those technologies. The legacy on premises back in 2005, 6. Microsoft did use TFS. This is the upgrade version of the cloud technology. The pipeline, again, I mentioned you can use for deployment. Whatever you developed, you can deploy to your test environment. If it is successful, then you put it in your pre-production for UAT. If the UAT is success, then you can put it in the production for go live activities. So you can use pipelines for your deployment CI/CD activities. Again, test plans, you can use this functionality for testing your components. Artifacts is pretty much used for keeping all your packages and connectors needed for deploying your components. For example, NuGet package may be needed for some of the build activity or development, or you need a connectors, then you can create artifacts here. You can use it in the pipeline or any other activities. So this is pretty much helpful for the team who is working on a product development. So all the product development, the modern DevOps team is pretty much your business analyst, product owners. They can use the board. The developers can pick up the task from here. They can develop a code and give it to build a team. They can build and deploy it. Testing team can use test plans, and pretty much artifacts can be used for all our reusable NuGet packages, etc. So the next topic we are going to talk about monitoring to know about what we are doing with Azure, because Azure is the public cloud. As you know, like pay for what we are using. When we start using this Azure for larger organization, we don't know how much cloud services we are using, how much money we are spending. If you don't know all of this, how do you monitor and manage it? And what kind of recommendation you can get out of this resources, because this will be useful for continuous improvement. So based on the items mentioned here, you can quickly go through this. For example, are we using the cloud correctly? How do we know that? What kind of performance we are looking for? What kind of cost we are spending? And what kind of planned downtimes are announced by Microsoft? How this can impact my Azure resources? So those things you need to know. So monitoring. So what we are going to discuss in this particular topic is more of like what kind of advice we can collect from the resources, and how Microsoft can help us, and then how we are going to monitor our resources sitting in the Azure public cloud. Monitoring is pretty much is main thing for a business continuity. If the system is down or it is going to throw error, how we are going to respond to that. So monitoring is the second major component we are going to discuss today. And the last one is to, as I mentioned, like planned outtime, outages, and what is the downtimes are, and Azure as public cloud globally available, which country has a downtime today, and how that is going to impact us. So if I have a resources deployed in multiple geography or a region, I need to know the outages across the regions. So all of this can be verified against the Azure Service Health. So now we are going to talk about three services from Azure. Instead of talking about theory, let's go to the site and explore what are those. So as I mentioned, Azure can be accessed through portal.azure.com. When you log into this, you can go to the main menu and look for Azure Advisor. When you click the Azure Advisor, you can see Azure Advisor can help you with the 5 major components, which are like a cost, how you can optimize your cost, where you're spending more money. So those kind of insight, this particular Azure Advisor component or portal can help you with it. Because I have only sample data, it doesn't have more information to promote here. Otherwise, it can tell you like where you are actually spending more money, where you can minimize that. And if you have any security related threats or security related improvements, Azure can tell you these are the areas you don't have the proper configurations, like NHG group you didn't configure, or it can tell you you don't have the multi-factor authentication. So those kind of security tips can come from this topic. And then you have operational excellence and performance. These insights, actually what this is doing in Microsoft, behind the screen, they are collecting all of our usage data from the resources, and they are using the machine learning AI capability behind the screen, and they are serving us via this Azure Advisor portal. So you can also already see the machine learning AI components are already built top of this Azure to help the customers. So the next one we want to talk about we'll be discussing about the Azure monitoring. Azure monitoring. Um, so Azure monitoring, as I mentioned, like purely collecting data from your application or your operating system resources, etc. The whole tenant level or your Azure resources level. You can configure the logs and metrics. This can be collected from your resources by the Azure Monitor. Azure Monitor has various functionalities which can help you to take a decision out of this. So this Azure Monitor is a complete package. For each applications or a service level, you can configure whether you wanted to use log analytics or you want to use application insight for your web applications. All of this can help you to monitor and take action against each of the symptoms or issues and errors. So the next one, Azure Service Health. Let's go to the Azure portal. So the monitoring, before moving into Azure Service Health, let's see the monitoring. So as I mentioned, this is a sample tenant. What are the controls we have? We have the alerts in case in my resources are failed. What kind of notifications I need for my support team to look after this. We can configure the alert rules and that can help you, and then you can see the matrices, logs out of your data and resources. Also, you can see like diagnostic settings. These are more of like underlying infrastructure related diagnostic logs and audits you can use. The next item we want to talk about service health, pretty much to know about services issues. What are the services currently has issues? Planned maintenance. Right now, no planned maintenance in the subscription which I have, and the health advisories. If any of my component require some recommendations, this telling me like the health advisor and security advisor again. All the security related health and advices can be populated here. So for this Azure AZ900, all we need to know about like each of the services, when to use what. So monitoring for your infrastructure, application monitoring, service health for knowing the planned maintenance, to know about the resources level failures. Recently, you might be knowing like some of the European region has impact on our virtual network. So if something happening, immediately they will be publishing here. There are some of the services are having issue, then you can fix those things. So these three component we talk about or we discussed now. Let's move on to the other areas. What is pending from this topic? Again, this knowledge check will come back. So other than this, we discussed this last week, but this is part of the part three. We already discussed in the previous session. In the part three, you need to know about the machine learning. Sorry, one minute. So you need to understand in the part three, you need to understand the machine learning capabilities, cognitive services, bot services. We already discussed that. Next, you have the DevOps services, pretty much your management of how you can improve or implement DevOps process within the organization, how Azure can help you with implementing those DevOps process and the tool sets we discussed. Then we talk about advisors, monitor, service health. So the next few items which are occurred for the part three is how you'll be deploying, how you'll be managing the your resources within the Azure. So we discussed last week. You can create a services through Azure portal. You can create, delete, modify everything. You can do through the browser Azure portal, and you can also use Azure PowerShells command line interfaces, or you can use some REST clients from Visual Studio to Azure portal. You can deploy. Visual Studio is one of the development tool. From Visual Studio, you can create a website or you can create a virtual machines, and you can also use Visual Studio to develop ARM templates, where you can say pretty much all your infrastructure you can write as a code. Like, I want a virtual machine, I want a virtual network, everything you can write from the Visual Studio as a ARM template and JSON script. So this covers your variety of options available to manage and to create and deploy your resources within the Azure. So the next item we want to discuss the serverless. So serverless, it's nothing but we know we have IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS services. So if you take the IaaS, it's pretty much like you are controlling, you are renting a virtual machines or a compute, and the rest of the things you are managing. So when you are renting, you have to pay for what you use. It could be like a monthly charge or daily charge, but you're actually renting a resources. It is like a you have the car, and you are renting a car, um, like the operational burdens you have to manage it. Whereas in PaaS, it is pretty much like you are not owning the car, but you are leasing the car. So you are taking for certain period. When the job done, you are handing over. But whereas in the serverless area, it is pure, pretty much like you are not doing anything. You are just using like a taxi. Whenever you need, you jump onto the taxi, you use it, and move away. So you don't need to worry about the car maintenance operation. You only pay for at the time of you are from location to location. You're only paying for that. So similar way, if you want to use Azure compute resources for running some piece of code that need to be executed, then you can just use a serverless components only for the time you are using. So this is the serverless concept currently popular in the industry. So what are the serverless component exist in Azure? So today we want to discuss two major items, which are Azure Functions and Azure Logic Apps. Azure Functions, it is it is like a piece of it is like a component where you can run, you can use, you can deploy your piece of code. It could be a C sharp, or it could be a PHP. You can just deploy the code and you can execute, and at the time of execution you will be charged only for the execution. The rest of the time you will not be charged, because you are only running whenever your application need to get this information from the piece of code. For example, you have one web application, it has to go and take a data from database. Then you can have Azure function in the middle layer as a business logic. The web app, when it makes the call, it goes to database and getting the data. So for that, you don't need to run a dedicated virtual machine, because you are going to pay for monthly cost. But in this case, whenever your application is going to run, only that time you need to run this code. So pretty much you can go with the Azure functions to do this kind of activities. Then you have the Azure Logic Apps. Logic Apps is like a low-code deployment platform. It is like a workflows. You can integrate with various components. Like you wanted to do some services based on the outcome from Azure functions. You wanted to notify someone. Then you use Azure Logic as a component. Like Azure functions calls the Azure Logic apps, then Azure Logic can notify some users by email or texting or SMS. So this framework, you can see the pretty much what are the serverless platform components exist. Azure function, you can execute your code, and the Azure logic apps, you can use it for like designing your workflows. Even create, it's more of like you can collect all the data from various resources or machines, collect that and process it. So this event grid also one of the example for serverless component. So this is the just a reference architecture, how this can be helpful. If you are seeing this from the screen, like this gives you example of taxi running. So like Uber has a or any other local taxi companies, when they have a website or a mobile app, we were thinking like how they would have developed it, what kind of backend technologies they will have. You don't need a heavy invested infrastructure for running this kind of scenarios. You can simply go with the minimal cost and pay for what you are using and serverless technologies. In this example, I have a right share example. I have a Azure Business to Consumer Active Directory. So this will help to register individual users, and the user ID, password, everything managed here. And then I have the website, which is basically I come to this web app, either mobile app or website. I come to this interface, book any information, then it goes into API management layer, where because we have multiple APIs to manage it. So this API management gateway layer will help me to send requests based on the web app request. If it is related to drivers, it will go to API drivers API, notify the driver that there is some demand is there, and they can request it, and they can accept it. When they accept it, it becomes a trip. The trip can be next move into next stage. We can monitor, and then when this is completed, then we can take action against it. But this example, like all these yellow symbols are Azure functions. So Azure functions are used as a API from your Azure web app. You are booking your ride. It goes to the driver. Driver is accepting. Then trip it converts as a trip. Then trip information goes to the event grid, because millions of users will be using this application. So we need to process those individual records. So the moment it converts as a trip goes into event grid. Event grid is actually managing all our events. This can go into logic apps. The logic app can notify the trip. So this can inform driver that your ride is confirmed, and it also can notify the passenger that your booking is confirmed. Then you can see a Power BI trip processor. Whenever this completed, it can send it to data can be processed, and it can be visualized in Power BI for okay, how many booking today happened, how many booking completed, how many got cancelled. All of those information you can get it. So pretty much the entire taxi service is most of the component here. What you are seeing, it's pretty much low code solutions, and pay for what you use, the minimal cost you are going to spend. You don't have any physical infrastructure. You don't have even IaaS servers, like virtual machines, Kubernetes. You don't have anything. All components we are using serverless technologies. Only this Power BI, it's a SaaS service. The rest of the components we are using serverless component here. So I think for covering the part 3, we covered most of the data points we want to discuss today. Just to recap, machine learning, you can use it for predictive analytics, cognitive services. If your application is required to um, use the language conversion or speech related outcome, you can if your application need to observe the language, the speech from the users, and then respond some information, you can use cognitive services. And you can use the bot services for developing a robo advisor or a chat based response from your web application. You can use bot services. Then we discussed the DevOps component, like automating your entire DevOps process, DevOps team. And we discussed the Azure Advisor, Monitor, Service Health. And the last two items we discussed today, Azure Function and Logic App. So this Azure Function and Logic App can act as a serverless component, and you can only pay for what you're using. And I'm going to quickly share some demo here. I hope you guys can see my screen. I have a piece of code developed in Visual Studio. This is going to help me to analyze the image and get my outcome from the image. It's just a simple sample. I'm using behind the screen image processing cognitive services. You can see here, I'm going to upload an image and the image is going to tell me some outcomes. So probably like we can take some sample here. Okay, I'm going to save this image and I'm going to process this image to know the answer. So when I upload this image to my system, the system actually using the backend Azure Cognitive Services. Now you can see the image is processed. Now I can get the result out of this image. What is actually happening? You can see a person riding a bike. That information is maybe like this is small use case, but when you are working on a bigger scale project, if you have some sort of like you want to process images to know what does this image means, like maybe this is useful for investigation purpose when you are processing millions of images. You can't manually do it. If you run it everything into a system can read and convert a text. The text can be indexed and you can search against this text for your investigation. This can be helpful for any kind of use cases. So it's the same way like previously I processed.
Karthik, one question is, you are saying this is the code you have developed in the local connecting to the Azure Cognitive Services.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay.
This is just a sample for demonstrating here. So
Yeah.
here you can see like I uploaded a 007 image. It predicting like who is this person and what exactly like wearing a suit and tie. So this is the cognitive services feature. Like you can see the the information collecting from this image indexing. Also like another one, a man riding a skateboard up on the side. It's also telling like what kind of skating they are doing. So other day I have uploaded a image. I think the popular people, because the backend Microsoft has collected all the data, they know who is this person. And this example you can see like behind the screen, cognitive services are pay for what you use services. This can be consumed for various use cases in your application. But because Microsoft is investing the machine learning AI algorithms behind the screen, they collected all the data, so this can process. And I also this morning I did this cycle one. This is a man riding on the back of the cycle. So all is this is simple example, but this can be used in a various scenarios. This is one of the cognitive example. I think today we want to discuss and explore the Azure Part 3 component. I think we discuss all of this pretty much. So Azure functions. So just to recap everyone to these are the topic we discussed today. All you need to know, high level, what services, when to use, and what kind of benefit you can get it. If you remember this high level information, it is easy to pass this AZ900 exam. So if you're already familiar with this, I think today's sessions, we can end with this topic. I think we covered the part 3 section of AZ900. I think the couple of items I want to highlight before we close the session today. So when you go into Azure, you can also see some couple of IoT component. Not sure how many people are familiar with the IoT. IoT, Internet of Things, we discussed, I think, in the first session. From various machines, you can collect data. For example, like car manufacturer, car companies, when they are operating, they want to know about the car performance, like a Tesla or a Ford or any kind of car. You can take example. They have sensors. They are collecting data from various resources. Send this information to your cloud technologies. So whatever the information I'm collecting from these devices, I can send it to my public cloud storage or a system, which can receive it and process it, and then I can present it to my application. So the management will know what happened actually. Um, Another example, we can take it like toll. Tolls can, if you have a sensor there, you can collect data from each and every cars or buses moving through that route. You can also generate a report and send it to management. Okay, today we saw like thousands of cars was passing. Within the thousand, how many are Ford, how many are Benz? You can collect out of that data points you're collecting. If you're collecting the car registration number, the car registration number you are collecting and send it to cloud. Cloud can match that data with your databases from the registration number. It can create a report out of the combined data. So to collect data from resources like a toll or a car, you can consider like a small piece of IoT devices are configured there. So Azure comes with two major components like IoT Hub to help you to do this kind of functionality, because you are going to process millions of data. You need to know how you are collecting the data, how you are processing the data. So I'm just trying to take one good example there. So this is the IoT Hub functionality. Like as I mentioned, IoT devices sitting in either car or a toll or your or signals. All these devices can send data to your IoT Hub. IoT Hub can receive millions of data because it's a devices. You may have a millions of devices sitting across the globe. You can collect the data from each devices. Because you are processing millions of data, you need some sort of technology to process those data. So that's why Microsoft is developed a component called IoT Hub, which can, we discussed previously, like a even hub, even grid can collect all the data and send it to your individual resources to process. It could be Azure function, or it could be Logic App, or it could be a data lake functionality. It can receive the data, store it, process the ETL, and you can also use machine learning technologies to process the data. Then finally, you can present the information either through data visualization product or through any other applications. I think by this topic, we can conclude the part 3 completed today, and we can also discuss the part 4 in the next section. I think the aim of this is not to cover many topic in one session. So that's why we are keeping 45 minutes for every session. So I think it is really useful to know the basics of Azure. I think by today we are completing the part 3. In next session we will discuss the part 4, and then we'll be ready for AZ 900 exam. If you guys want to be prepared for AZ 900, I suggest strongly go to the Azure learning portals. You can collect some of the materials there. Simple text. I think whatever we discussed here, the same thing have been mentioned there, to know about each services and what is the pros and cons and what is the benefit. That level of information you need to remember. Thank you, guys. I think session for part 3 is I am finishing from this point. If you have any questions, we can discuss.